October 17, 2025. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which flows 20% of the world's oil supply every single day. At 06:47 hours, the U.S.-flagged supertanker Atlantic Voyager begins its routine transit through these contested waters, carrying 2.2 million barrels of crude oil destined for European refineries. The vessel's captain, experienced in these dangerous passages, maintains constant radio contact with the 5th Fleet Coordination Center. But within minutes, everything changes. Out of the morning haze, they emerge. Fast attack craft bearing the colors of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, armed with heavy machine guns and anti-ship missiles, racing toward the massive tanker at 40 knots. The confrontation that follows will shake global energy markets, trigger the largest U.S. naval deployment to the Persian Gulf in decades, and bring the world closer to economic collapse than at any point since the 2008 financial crisis. What began as a routine shipping operation becomes the flashpoint for a crisis that threatens to ignite the entire Middle East and strangle the global economy. This is Navy warfare. If you want to understand how a single attack in narrow waters can trigger worldwide economic chaos, smash that like button and subscribe for exclusive military analysis that reveals the hidden vulnerabilities of our interconnected world. The Atlantic Voyager represents everything Iran's hardliners despise about Western presence in what they consider Persian territorial waters. At 200 feet long and carrying enough crude oil to fuel a small nation for weeks, the supertanker embodies the global energy trade that flows through the Strait of Hormuz, despite Tehran's increasingly aggressive threats. Captain Michael Harrison, a veteran of Gulf operations with 23 years of maritime experience, knows these waters better than most. He also knows the risks. Intelligence briefings had warned of increased Revolutionary Guard activity following President Biden's recent statements supporting Israel's right to defend itself against Iranian proxy attacks. Tehran's response was predictable, escalating harassment of commercial shipping while testing American resolve in the world's most critical energy choke point. But harassment and open attack are different categories entirely, and what happened at 6:51 hours crossed every red line imaginable. The first indication of trouble came from the escort vessel USS Cyclone, a Cyclone-class patrol craft providing security for the transit. Radar operators detected multiple fast-moving contacts approaching from Iranian territorial waters at high speed. Within minutes, lookouts confirmed visual contact with 6 Revolutionary Guard fast attack craft, each armed with mounted heavy weapons and carrying squads of armed personnel. Unknown vessels. This is United States warship. You are approaching a commercial vessel in international waters. Alter course immediately and maintain safe distance, transmitted Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen from the Cyclone's bridge. The response came not in words, but in action. The Iranian boats accelerated, spreading into attack formation while training their weapons on both the tanker and its escort. At 06:53 hours, the first shots rang across the Strait of Hormuz. Revolutionary Guard fighters opened fire with 12.7mm heavy machine guns, raking the Atlantic Voyager's superstructure with sustained bursts. Windows shattered across the bridge as Captain Harrison and his crew dove for cover. The ship's communications officer managed to transmit a desperate mayday call before an Iranian rocket-propelled grenade struck the radio room, silencing their primary communications array. The USS Cyclone responded immediately, returning fire with its 25mm chain gun while maneuvering to intercept the attacking craft. Lieutenant Commander Chen knew her vessel was outgunned, 6 enemy boats against 1 patrol craft. But rules of engagement were clear. American vessels under attack had the right to defend themselves with all necessary force. What followed was a running battle across some of the world's most strategically important waters. Iranian attack craft used their speed and numbers to outflank the Cyclone while continuing their assault on the Atlantic Voyager. 1 Revolutionary Guard boat managed to close within 50 meters of the supertanker before launching an Iranian-manufactured Kosar anti-ship missile. The weapon struck the tanker's port side, punching through steel plating and igniting fuel vapors in a massive explosion that could be seen from 20 miles away. Captain Harrison felt his ship shudder as the explosion tore through 3 compartments. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel as damage control teams raced to contain fires that threatened to reach the main cargo holds. The Atlantic Voyager carried enough crude oil to create an environmental disaster, surpassing the Exxon Valdez spill if the fires spread to the primary storage tanks. The USS Cyclone's crew fought desperately to protect the burning tanker while engaging multiple Iranian attack craft. Gunner's mate First Class Rodriguez scored direct hits on 2 Revolutionary Guard boats with the vessel's main gun, sending both to the bottom of the Gulf. But the remaining Iranian craft continued their attack with fanatical determination, treating the engagement as a suicide mission rather than a tactical operation. At 07:08 hours, a second Iranian missile struck the Atlantic Voyager's stern section, triggering secondary explosions that sent towering flames hundreds of feet into the morning sky. The massive tanker, now dead in the water and burning from stem to stern, began listing to starboard as seawater flooded through multiple hull breaches. Captain Harrison ordered abandoned ship procedures as his crew fought desperately to reach lifeboats through smoke-filled corridors. The imagery that emerged from the attack would dominate global news cycles for weeks. Commercial aircraft flying overhead captured video of the massive tanker burning in the Strait of Hormuz, while Iranian attack craft circled like sharks. The footage, shared millions of times across social media platforms, showed the world's most critical energy choke point transformed into a war zone. Within hours of the attack, global oil markets convulsed with panic selling and speculation. Brent crude futures spiked 47% in a single trading session, the largest single-day increase in petroleum prices since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Major shipping companies immediately suspended all transits through the Strait of Hormuz, effectively cutting off 20% of global oil supply overnight. President Biden convened an emergency National Security Council meeting at 1400 hours Washington time, less than 6 hours after the initial attack. The options presented were stark and dangerous. Military retaliation could escalate into regional war involving Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other American allies. But allowing Iran to attack commercial shipping with impunity would invite further aggression, while demonstrating American weakness to adversaries worldwide. The decision came swiftly. Within 8 hours of the Atlantic Voyager attack, the Pentagon announced the emergency deployment of the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Persian Gulf. The Ford, America's newest and most advanced aircraft carrier, would lead a task force including 4 guided missile destroyers, 2 attack submarines, and over 70 combat aircraft. The message to Tehran was unmistakable. Attacks on commercial shipping would be met with overwhelming force. But Iran's leadership showed no signs of backing down from their escalatory path. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei appeared on state television that evening, declaring that the Persian Gulf belongs to Iran, and foreign invaders will face the consequences of their aggression. Revolutionary Guard commanders promised that any American military response would be met with a rain of missiles that will close the Strait of Hormuz permanently. The threats were not empty rhetoric. Intelligence analysts confirmed that Iran had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. Mobile ballistic missile launchers were dispersed along the southern coast, armed with Fateh 110 and Zulfikar missiles capable of striking ships throughout the Gulf. Hundreds of naval mines had been pre-positioned for rapid deployment across shipping channels. Most concerning were reports of advanced anti-ship missiles, including Chinese-designed systems capable of overwhelming even sophisticated American defense networks. Revolutionary Guard naval forces began implementing their closure strategy within hours of the carrier deployment announcement. Fast attack craft and submarines moved to pre-planned positions throughout the strait. Engineers began activating underwater obstacles designed to channel shipping into predetermined kill zones. Most ominously, reconnaissance drones began conducting detailed surveillance of the approaching American task force, gathering targeting data for what Iranian commanders promised would be the graveyard of American naval power. Want to understand how modern naval warfare adapts to asymmetric threats in confined waters? Hit subscribe and the notification bell to stay updated on Navy warfare's exclusive coverage of military operations in the world's most dangerous choke points. The USS Gerald R. Ford entered the Persian Gulf at 0200 hours on October 18th, leading the most powerful naval formation to operate in these waters since Operation Desert Storm. The carrier's nuclear reactors drove her through the night at 25 knots while her escorts maintained defensive formations designed to counter swarm attacks and missile strikes. Above the task force, E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft maintained constant surveillance of Iranian activities, while FA-18E Super Hornets flew combat air patrols armed with live ordnance. Admiral Patricia Williams, commanding the carrier strike group from the Ford's flag bridge, understood the unprecedented nature of her mission. Unlike previous deployments against conventional naval forces, this operation required countering an adversary that combined state-level military capabilities with terrorist tactics. Iran's strategy relied on overwhelming American defenses through sheer numbers, while exploiting the confined geography of the Gulf to negate technological advantages. The Iranian response began at 0347 hours with the launch of reconnaissance drones from bases along the southern coast. These unmanned aircraft, many based on captured or reverse-engineered American designs, approached the carrier group in waves while broadcasting on frequencies designed to jam defensive radar systems. The Ford's escort destroyers engaged the drones with evolved Sea Sparrow missiles and close-in weapon systems, creating a spectacular light show as interceptors detonated incoming targets. But the drone swarm served a dual purpose beyond reconnaissance. Each destroyed drone provided Iranian analysts with detailed information about American defensive capabilities and response patterns. By sacrificing expendable assets, Revolutionary Guard commanders gathered intelligence that would prove crucial for planning more sophisticated attacks against the carrier group. At 0530 hours, Iran escalated to direct military confrontation. Mobile Fateh 110 ballistic missile launchers fired a coordinated salvo of 12 weapons at the Ford strike group. The missiles, each carrying a 1,100-pound warhead, followed ballistic trajectories designed to overwhelm ship-based defense systems through simultaneous arrival times. Iranian military doctrine called for such attacks to achieve at least partial penetration of even advanced American defensive networks. The USS Gerald R. Ford's defensive response demonstrated the evolution of naval warfare technology since the last major Gulf confrontation. The ship's AN/SPY-6 radar system detected the incoming missiles within seconds of launch, immediately calculating intercept solutions for the task force's defensive weapons. SM-6 interceptors launched from multiple destroyers engaged the ballistic missiles during their terminal phase, while the Ford's own defensive systems prepared for any weapons that penetrated the outer defensive layer. The engagement lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. 11 Iranian missiles were destroyed by American interceptors, their debris raining harmlessly into the Gulf waters. But the 12th weapon achieved partial penetration of the defensive screen, detonating approximately 800 meters from the USS Porter, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. The explosion's shockwave damaged the destroyer's radar systems and injured 3 sailors, marking the first American casualties from direct Iranian military action in decades. Iranian state media immediately claimed victory, broadcasting footage of the missile launches while declaring that American naval forces had been taught a lesson in Persian Gulf waters. Revolutionary Guard commanders promised that future attacks would achieve direct hits, threatening to sink American warships if they remained in what Tehran considered territorial waters. The Ford strike group's response was immediate and devastating. Admiral Williams authorized a coordinated strike against the Iranian missile sites that had launched the attack. FA-18E Super Hornets and EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft launched from the carrier deck, while guided missile destroyers prepared Tomahawk cruise missile strikes against predetermined targets along the Iranian coast. At 0745 hours, American forces unleashed the most intensive strike operation in the Persian Gulf since 1987. Tomahawk missiles approached their targets from multiple vectors, while Super Hornets delivered precision-guided munitions against Iranian missile launchers, radar sites, and command centers. The strikes achieved tactical surprise, destroying or damaging 12 ballistic missile launchers and eliminating 3 Revolutionary Guard command posts before Iranian air defenses could respond effectively. But Iran's military doctrine anticipated such American responses and incorporated them into broader escalation strategies. Within hours of the American strikes, Revolutionary Guard naval forces implemented their most dangerous tactic, the deployment of naval mines throughout the Strait of Hormuz shipping channels. Using small boats and submarines, Iranian forces laid hundreds of mines designed to sink or damage commercial vessels while creating navigational hazards that would effectively close the waterway to civilian traffic. The mining operation transformed the Strait of Hormuz from a contested waterway into an active combat zone. International shipping companies suspended all transits indefinitely, while insurance rates for Gulf operations became prohibitively expensive. Global oil markets, already destabilized by the initial tanker attack, experienced complete collapse as traders realized that the world's most critical energy choke point had been effectively closed by military action. This is how asymmetric warfare tactics can challenge conventional naval superiority in strategic choke points. Subscribe to Navy Warfare and hit that bell icon for exclusive analysis of how modern conflicts reshape global energy security and economic stability. The economic implications of the strait closure extended far beyond energy markets. Manufacturing industries dependent on petroleum-based materials began shutting down production lines. Airlines grounded flights as jet fuel prices made operations economically impossible. Developing nations faced immediate humanitarian crises as they could no longer afford essential energy imports at market prices that had increased by over 300% in less than a week. European leaders convened emergency sessions while Asian governments activated strategic petroleum reserves in desperate attempts to maintain economic stability. The United Nations Security Council called emergency meetings, but geopolitical divisions prevented coordinated international responses. Russia and China, seeing opportunities to benefit from Western economic distress, blocked resolutions calling for immediate Iranian withdrawal from shipping lanes. President Biden faced the most critical foreign policy decision of his administration. Military advisors recommended massive escalation, airstrikes against Iranian naval bases, mining operations, and potentially even nuclear facilities if Tehran continued its aggressive actions. Economic advisors warned that prolonged strait closure could trigger the worst global recession since the 1930s, potentially destabilizing governments worldwide and triggering humanitarian disasters in energy-dependent regions. The intelligence community provided sobering assessments of Iranian capabilities and intentions. Revolutionary Guard forces had transformed the Persian Gulf into a defensive stronghold over decades of preparation. Thousands of mines, hundreds of missile launchers, and sophisticated underwater obstacles would require months of sustained combat operations to neutralize completely. Moreover, Iranian commanders appeared willing to sacrifice their entire navy to maintain the strait closure, viewing economic warfare against the West as more important than preserving military assets. Admiral Williams, coordinating naval operations from the Ford's Combat Information Center, understood that her forces faced an unprecedented challenge. Traditional naval warfare doctrine emphasized maneuver and firepower projection, but the confined waters of the Persian Gulf negated many conventional advantages. Every movement of American ships was observed by Iranian reconnaissance assets, while defensive positions prepared over decades provided enemies with significant tactical advantages. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: international maritime law and coordinated multinational operations. Rather than escalating to full-scale warfare, the Biden administration chose to implement what became known as the Hormuz Clearance Protocol. This operation combined American naval power with international legal authority, European mine-sweeping capabilities, and regional partner support to gradually reopen the strait while maintaining pressure on Iranian forces. The protocol's first phase involved systematic mine-sweeping operations conducted by specialized vessels from the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. These ships, designed specifically for mine warfare in confined waters, began clearing safe passages through Iranian minefields while protected by American naval forces. The operation required unprecedented coordination between NATO allies and regional partners, demonstrating how modern security challenges demanded multinational solutions. Iranian forces initially attempted to interfere with mine-sweeping operations through submarine attacks and drone strikes. The USS Ford's combat air patrols engaged Iranian aircraft while attack submarines hunted Revolutionary Guard underwater assets. These engagements remained limited in scope, avoiding the massive escalation that could have triggered regional war, while maintaining sufficient pressure to deter Iranian interference with clearance operations. The second phase involved establishing protected shipping corridors through cleared areas of the strait. International naval forces created safety zones where commercial vessels could transit under military escort while maintaining defensive formations capable of countering Iranian attacks. This approach allowed gradual resumption of energy shipments while demonstrating international resolve to maintain freedom of navigation. The Hormuz Crisis, as historians would later term these events, lasted 43 days from the initial Atlantic Voyager attack to the complete reopening of commercial shipping lanes. During this period, global oil prices averaged 230% above pre-crisis levels, while international cooperation reached levels not seen since World War II. The crisis demonstrated both the fragility of global energy systems and the effectiveness of coordinated international responses to asymmetric threats. The final resolution came through a combination of military pressure, economic sanctions, and diplomatic negotiations mediated by regional partners, including the United Arab Emirates and Oman. Iran agreed to withdraw mining operations and cease attacks on commercial shipping in exchange for limited sanctions relief and guarantees regarding future naval operations in the Gulf. The agreement established new protocols for military activities in the strait, while maintaining the principle of freedom of navigation for international commerce. If you've stayed with us through this analysis of how energy security intersects with naval warfare, it means you understand the complex realities of modern conflict. Hit that like button, subscribe to Navy Warfare, and drop a comment below with your assessment. Should naval forces prioritize protecting commercial shipping or deterring state-level aggression? Your engagement helps us continue providing analysis that reveals the strategic realities mainstream media often overlooks. The lessons learned from the Hormuz crisis influenced naval doctrine and international maritime law for decades afterward. The demonstration that small, determined forces could effectively challenge global energy security led to massive investments in alternative energy sources, strategic petroleum reserves, and redundant transportation networks. The crisis also validated the importance of international cooperation in addressing threats that transcended national boundaries and traditional military responses. For the crew of the Atlantic Voyager, rescue operations conducted by international maritime forces saved all hands despite the vessel's total loss. Captain Harrison's decision to maintain damage control efforts while coordinating crew evacuation became a case study in maritime crisis management. The environmental impact of the tanker's destruction, while significant, was contained through rapid international response and advanced cleanup technologies developed specifically for such scenarios. The USS Gerald R. Ford completed her deployment, having demonstrated that American naval power could operate effectively in contested environments while maintaining escalation control. Admiral Williams received commendation for her handling of complex tactical situations that required balancing military effectiveness with diplomatic considerations. The Ford Strike Group's operations became the foundation for new doctrine addressing asymmetric threats in strategic choke points worldwide. The broader implications of the Hormuz crisis extended far beyond military and energy considerations. The event demonstrated how regional conflicts could instantly acquire global significance through their impact on critical infrastructure systems. It validated predictions that future warfare would increasingly focus on economic targets rather than traditional military objectives, requiring new approaches to defense planning and international cooperation. Most significantly, the crisis revealed the interconnected nature of modern security challenges, where military action, economic stability, and diplomatic cooperation could not be separated into distinct categories. The successful resolution required expertise from naval warfare specialists, energy market analysts, environmental scientists, and international legal experts working in unprecedented coordination. The Strait of Hormuz returned to its role as the world's most critical energy choke point, but with new protections and international agreements governing its use. The crisis had tested the resilience of global systems and demonstrated both their vulnerabilities and their capacity for adaptation when faced with coordinated threats to international stability.